Good night and welcome to This Week in Review. This week consists of an interview with Mr. Dave Gilbert, our MHA. The elementary school held their spring concert earlier this week. And Mr. Joe Hiscock visited our studio again this week for part 2 of the boat safety seminar. And more, so please stay tuned.
Participaction asks, what can you do in a week? Go to the moon and back? Eat 480 burritos? Watch grass grow? Or join in Fit Week, the world's largest boogie down, shake it up fun time celebration of active living. The whole nation's shaking for Fit Week. Join Fit Week activities in your neighborhood May 27th to June 5th. So don't watch the grass grow, make it happen. Participaction.
On Tuesday, the elementary school held their spring concert, and each grade participated. Here's a quick look. The concert will be held in its entirety later this week. Like other Improving Your Odds classes, group number 4 had written a letter to Mr. Walter Carter, and I was given a copy of this letter, and the class requested that this letter be read tonight on the news. And here's how it goes. Dear Mr. Walter Carter, we are a group of 20 fisher persons enrolled in the Improving Your Odds program, group number 4, in the town of Burgeo on the southwest coast of Newfoundland. We are really concerned about the reopening of our fish plant upon which all of our livelihood depend. One of the most important questions in our mind is if our fish plant will or not reopen. We need to know now because what we do in the future will depend on the opening or continued closing of our fish plant. Should our fish plant reopen, answers to the following questions are required. And here's a list of questions that they add in the letter. Will our plant be a regional or community plant, and who will work there? Will our fish plant be maintained so that it will be ready for operation when the fishery reopens? Will our plant have access to offshore stocks? Will the government replace the dragger fleet with new boats? Will there be community plant quotas established? Will we have secondary processing at our plant? Will the plant have the licenses that belong to the 4 draggers that were sold? And will the government help individuals interested in getting their own boats? We feel that our plant should be operated as a community plant because it is not big enough to take care of the workforce that is in Burgeo now. We have a modernized plant in a central location, and our port is ice-free all year round. And a paved highway connects our town with the Trans-Canada Highway. Traditionally, our trawler fleet accessed offshore fish stocks, and we would like to see this continued in the future. We realize that we have asked very serious questions. The reality of the situation is simply this: we need answers now. Not in 5 years' time. Our livelihood depends on decisions that we may have to make now. And that's from Improving Your Odds group number 4. Another letter was presented to me as well. It's a copy of a letter that was written by the Union President, Mr. Jerome McDonald, to the Federal Minister of Fisheries, Mr. Brian Tobin. And here's how this letter goes. Dear Mr. Tobin, I have been hearing a lot of talk over the last 2 weeks concerning the in-cart payments being reduced by 6% come May 15 under the new compensation program. As you are no doubt aware, when the offshore fishery closed in 1992, all of the fishery workers took, on average, a 40% cut in income. This type of reduction in income plays very hard on fishery workers and their families, and also on the economy of Newfoundland. I am aware of many families having to give up their health insurance plan simply because they could not afford to pay their monthly premiums. There are many adults and children to whom the doctors have prescribed medication, but they just cannot afford to have this prescription filled. I also realize that $1.9 billion over a 5-year period, with more people depending on the program for survival, is certainly not a lot of funds. But I also realize we have to put people first, and the people are our most important resource. Therefore, Mr. Tobin, I ask you not to reduce the amount of income people are presently receiving. If you must recoup a 6%, I am sure there are other areas of the program you can cut without reducing the people's income. I trust you will seriously consider my requests. Yours sincerely, Mr. Jerome McDonald. This week I met with our MHA, Mr. Dave Gilbert, for an interview. Here's a quick look. That 85% of the public service sector members are willing to walk out. Would you like to elaborate on that more?
Well, Dina, you know, I suppose that's I don't know where the report coming. I'd assume that it's true, and it possibly is. You got to bear in mind that the country that we're living in, Canada, right now, is in very serious financial trouble. All of us, every one of us, man, woman, and child that happen to live in Canada today, have a provincial and federal debt that totals $22,000. So all of us the government has built up that much of a debt trying to run itself, run and pay for the services that we're being provided with. This is where it now costs us. So our children are going to be doomed to paying off this $22,000 per capita debt that we have. So all the governments have made a conscious decision that they have to cut down on the spending. You heard the federal government budget came in and they talked about that they are trying this year to keep the current account debt below $40 billion. And over the next 3 to 4 years, they're going to eliminate the current account debt. In this province, we brought in a budget which said that we're going to try and keep our current account debt down to $24 million this year. But in order to keep our current account debt down to $24 million, we have to go to the public service unions, the teachers, the healthcare workers, the road workers, all the workers that work with the government, and sit down and negotiate with them. And what we have to negotiate with them is that another $50 million has got to come out of the benefits and wage package that they now have. So, unlike some of the we started at this early, and we really haven't cut back anyone's salary. The only thing is we put a freeze on the civil servant salaries for the last 4 years. This year we're saying, look, we got to negotiate. We got to get our house in order now to the point that we'd like to go on and carry on and sit down and get into and be able to give you raises again and stuff like that. But there's some stuff in your contracts that we want to sit down and negotiate.
The interview will be shown in its entirety after the news tonight, and many topics were discussed. This week, BBS received a copy of the regulations that was released regarding ATVs. For more information about these regulations, you may come to the BBS office during regular hours, or you may call our office at 886-2935. Last week's news showed an interview with Mr. Joe Hiscock concerning boat safety. Part 2 shows a demonstration of the different items needed for the different types of boats. Good afternoon, Joe.
Good day.
We're going to start on part 2 of what we did last week regarding the boat safety seminar. And Joe's going to show some of his props that he have here today. So you can take it over.
Okay, well first of all I want to thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to come in. And it's one of the great things about having your own local television station is that you can utilize it for doing those things. With everybody now, it's only not going to be much longer, and people are going to be putting their boats in the water and getting ready to go to the brook and that.
Yes.
And boating safety is a very a much big concern with people's lives. And what I'd like to do today is to show some of the things that we have here that can possibly help to save people's lives and that should be carried on board their boats. Last week we talked about the different things that were supposed to be carried, and today I want to show you basically what they are. Now this here is a what we call a standard life jacket, and this here life jacket, as all life jackets and PFDs must be approved by the Department of Transport, and you will find the DOT approval number on them. So anybody out there who don't have any life jackets or PFDs and want to go and buy them, then keep that in mind, that when that you're going looking for them, you will find on there, it'll tell you what the weight is. Like this one here now would be for persons over 32 kilograms. And make sure, like I say, that when that you're going to buy it, that it says that it is DOT approved. And again, now what we have here is what we call a PFD, or a personal flotation device. And a lot of people get them confused and think that they are both life jackets. That is not so. This is a life jacket, and this is a PFD. And basically what the difference is between them, the real important difference is, with the life jacket, when you have this on and you go into the water, then you are, if that you got knocked unconscious, a standard life jacket is guaranteed to turn you over in the water so that you are, your head is out of the water and your face up so that you can still breathe. Now with a PFD like this will keep you afloat, but it is not guaranteed that it's going to keep you over on your back. So that's one of the big differences between them.
I'm glad you said that, because I always thought this was a life jacket.
A lot of people do, but like I say, that this is a personal flotation device, and it's just for the flotation. This one here, like I say, now, like a lot of people, when that they're have to go into the water holds them down, their body, so that they get so stiff that they can't move, and they cannot control what's happening to them. With you have on the standard life jacket, it will keep you on your back, and it will keep you with your, you know, with your mouth out of the water. And of course, then you will survive longer. Now with the PFD, that will keep you afloat. But once that you can't control your movement anymore, you'll slip under the water, and you know, you'll sort of fall on your face, and you'll drown.
So this air goes around your legs so it doesn't fall
No,
out,
this
right?
air doesn't go around your legs. This just goes around your body.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this air goes around the body. This one here now, of course, if you had a choice of which one to wear, and actually you would wear the PFD, and that is, you know, it's more
Yeah.
comfortable and it's more snugger.
Yeah.
And like I say, it's all according now to what the purpose is. Another important thing that we found when we're talking about safe boating, that when you're talking about the difference between a fishing boat and a pleasure boat, okay? Now, in a fishing boat, if the boat is being used for fishing, there must be a standard life jacket like this aboard for each person that is aboard that fishing boat. If it's a pleasure boat that you're just using if you're going up the brook or, you know, boogieing around, then you can have either a standard life jacket or you can have a PFD, or a personal flotation device, or you can have what we call the flotation cushion. And those are the things. Now we have another type of life jacket that I wanted to show you. And this one here is called a small vessel life jacket. And again, you know, you just want to put it on. All right. And again, like I say, you just snap it together. And there, and out there. Zipper it up. There you are. And this is a life jacket, and it's called a small vessel life jacket. So this is the type of one that you would use for the pleasure boats. But again, not for the fishing, because this is what they call small fishing life jacket.
Okay.
Those are basically the differences between them. But you have many different types of the PFDs. And again, this one here is they found this one to be a real nice one. And again, you want to just try that one on? I mean, it's not bulky and it's easy and it's, you know,
yes.
but it's PFD and it's meant to be worn. And so I would certainly recommend that when you're going to go aboard the boat, you're going up the brook, put it on, because you never know when you're going to go in the water. And even if you can swim, if you're in the water long enough, the cold water will numb you to the point where you just can't swim, you can't control yourself. That's why a lot of people, even just 50 feet out from the, you know, from the wharf, and that people, the cold water just shuts them down. They can't move,
Yes.
and they drown, right? So
So
those
is there
are nice and
certain-
comfortable.
Yes, is there certain weight for the different sizes?
Yes, it's marked on the inside part, and again, make sure if you're going to buy it, it doesn't matter what the name is, but this one here now is a medium, and it tells you here for the different sizes.
Okay.
And same thing over here, and this is where you're going to find your DOT approval number to on the inside cover of the PFD. Okay, and of course we've even got them for, you know, for the little for the children, and this here would be for the real small toddler. So and again, it tells you that it's the DOT, which is Department of Transport Canada approved, and make sure it is Department of Transport approved and not the U.S. Coast Guard approved. A lot of them you'll find it's got U.S. Coast Guard approved. That's no good. I'm not saying that they are no good. It means that they are not approved. If that they're not approved by the Department of Transport, then they're considered to be not approved in Canada. Okay? And this one here again, you know, for little toddlers. So they are available for all sizes for everybody. And those again are another type of the PFD. And again, this is of course the floater coat. You know, everybody calls the floater coat. And again, if you're going to go buy one, go and have a look on the inside and make sure that it is DOT approved. And those here are very popular. And again, this would be a PFD, personal flotation device, and not a life jacket. And again, of course, here we have the floater coat. This is the one that lots of people are getting more and more. And again, it is a PFD and not a life jacket.
So it would still keep you afloat, but not
Oh, absolutely.
necessarily on your back.
It won't, no, not necessarily. Basically, the only one that they say, well, is guaranteed to keep you on your back, regardless which way you go into the water, whether it's feet first, head first, sideways, on your back, on your stomach, it will turn you and keep you on your back with your face up. So it's a good feature, but they are bulky and people don't want to wear them. And that's why, well, those PFDs are a lot more comfortable, and like I say, but they will not. None of the PFDs will keep you on your back. They will keep you afloat, but not on your back. And what that we have, when that we talk about the different size boats, for the pleasure boats, they start from 0 up to 5.5 meters. And then we have from 5.5 meters that go up to 8 meters, and then from 8 meters to 12, and then from 12 meters to 20, and then all the other pleasure boats are classed beyond 20 meters, which are 65 feet. And in the fishing category, boats are start from 0 up to 12.2 meters, and that are less than 15 gross registered tons. And then the other category in the fishing is boats that are longer than 12.2 meters, but still less than 15 gross registered tons. And I just brought a couple of flares I wanted to show, because anybody that's for the pleasure boats that are up to 5.5 meters don't need to have flares, but if that your boat is bigger than 5.5 meters, then you are required to carry 6 flares of type A, B, and C. And that's what I have. I have type A, that's this one, and type B, which is this one, and type C. And I'm going to explain what they do. This here is a parachute flare, and this is a type A. And what this flare will do, when that it is activated, it'll go up about 1,000 feet, or 300 meters, and then it will open, and it's into a parachute then, and then it will descend, and it'll take about 60 seconds. And this particular one is got 15,000 candle power, so that's how bright it is. And like I say, it's lasts for about 60 seconds. This one here is what we call the multi-star, or now that you can get different sizes of those. This is, or a B, this is classed as a B. This one in particular is called a Sky Blazer, and this is a twin, meaning that it's got two stars. But you can get them larger than this too. And this one here, you just unscrew the bottom and just pull, and it would go. But they only last for about maybe 4 to 5 seconds. That's what those there was. And the other one, they go up about 300 feet. Those about 100 meters up into the air.
And do they have just as much power as type A?
No, not by. Those have not as much. And those here now, before you'd activate this, you'd certainly want to have somebody fairly close to you, because it only lasts for about 4 to 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So you'd want somebody pretty close to you out in an aircraft before you'd set this off. This one here is a type C, and this here, when it's activated, is an AN. If you just hold this in your hand, and it burns very bright, you wouldn't want to look at it, and you would hold it over the side of your boat, and that this would last for about 60 seconds too. And you can have, like for the pleasure boaters and the fishermen, they can have any combination. You can have 3 of those, 2 of them, or you can have 4 of those, 1 and 1, or any combination, as long as that you have 6 in your boat. And again, I want to emphasize the fact of the date of manufacture. They're only good for 4 years from the date of manufacture, and that applies to all of your flares. Okay?
Now that's required for a fishing boat. What is there any required for a pleasure boat?
Any pleasure boat that is over 5.5 meters.
Oh,
Okay, so 5.5 meters up to 8 meters. as we have, and like again, I say I'm taking this here from the Safe Boating Guide, and if anybody doesn't have either one, and if they want one, then they can give me a call, 886-2838, Monday to Friday, and I'll gladly get it out to you. Like I say, in the pleasure craft, that it's we start with vessels up to 5.5 meters, or that would be up to 18 feet. And then you don't need flares on that boat. Okay. But if that your boat is over or from 5.5 meters up to 8 meters, then you will need the flares, and you have to have 6. And all of the equipment that we're talking about, it must be approved stuff. It must be approved. And then, of course, then you go, like say, with the 5.5 to 8 meters is 18 to 26 feet, and then we go from 26 feet to 40 feet. And the bigger the boat, just the more equipment that you're going to need. So if somebody doesn't know what that they are supposed to have, then by all means give me a call, and we'll do what we can to help them out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much for coming by and showing the public things that is needed and known when they have their own boat or fishing boat. So, thank you.
Okay, again, like I say, I want to thank you. It's very important, and for them to. I think there's going to be more checks done on the boats this year to check to see if people do have this stuff. It is required by law to have it, and that the onus is on the boaters to find out what is they are supposed to have aboard of their particular boat. And we can get it out to them, the information, so when they do go off and boat, they have all the required equipment, and they know then if they get checked by the RCMP, then they're not going to be ticketed. They have the proper equipment, and if there is an accident, then they have the life jackets and all the required things that can possibly save their lives.
Yes, and that's what means the most.
That's right on, because you only got one. That's it.
Yeah.
Look out to it.
That's right. Thank you very much, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is a special documentary. It was done by Dave Cooper and Jody Fosse, 2 journalism students at West Viking College in Stephenville. This documentary is about the loss of the Ramea School. The documentary is entitled, Coping with Loss, the Ramea Fire.
The island of Ramea, an isolated community of 1,400 inhabitants on Newfoundland's southwest coast, accessible only by boat, had a disastrous experience last November that will long be remembered for generations to come. Students went off to school in Ramea on the morning of November 23rd, 1993, just like any other morning. However, this particular morning would prove to be one which they would never forget. Ironically, this brick chimney, the only structure still intact following the devastating fire at St. Boniface All-Grade School in Ramea, is the very structure that caused the blaze. At approximately 10 a.m. on the morning of November 23rd, St. Boniface, the only school on the island, was gutted by fire. Although the losses resulting from the fire are estimated at $3 million, all that was lost can be replaced. Fortunately, there were no injuries or fatalities as a result of the fire. James King, principal of St. Boniface All-Grade School, tells of the cause of the fire which leveled their school.
It started, I guess, in the chimney, at a section where the stove pipe went into the chimney, and I think over the course of years it had rusted. That was a contributing factor, plus the fact the night prior to the fire, the power was off, and therefore it was cold in the school the next morning, and the furnace was on for a long period of time. So the combination of the old stovepipe and chimney and the fact that the furnace was on for such a long period was the cause.
At the time of the fire, there were 252 students and 20 teachers occupying the building. Jennifer Fagan, a phys ed teacher at St. Boniface, recalls the morning vividly and is quite proud of the students' reactions to the fire alarm.
Some of them really panicked, but most of them remained calm, especially little ones. I must say, they were really good about it. We told them all that it was a real fire and that they should get ready and go home as soon as they could, and they just filed out in a real orderly fashion. We were really pleased with their behavior.
When you're sure, remember to hit this side first, then this side. Doesn't hit your own side after you're sure.
Simone Kendall and Kylie Keeping, grade 9 students, tell of their impressions of that day.
I was frightened at first, but I thought it was voluntarily, like where we go on fire drills, and sometimes it's because of safety regards, but I wasn't sure of it this one because it was such a cold day.
Kylie, how did you feel when the fire alarm went off in your school in November?
I felt really bad because, well, first I just thought it was just like any ordinary drill, but then they told me there was smoke, and I felt really bad.
Okay, did you fall behind in your studies as a result of the fire?
No, I don't think so. In a couple subjects I might have, but I picked up again.
Okay, how much time did you lose as a result?
Not very much, because my mother and father made sure I picked up as soon as I could.
We also spoke to Jolene Warren and asked her if her grades suffered as a result of the time lost.
Yes, a lot. Most of my marks went down a lot.
Okay, how much time did you lose as a result of the fire?
Almost a month.
We spoke to these students in their makeshift gymnasium located in St. Pat's Church Hall. James King explained how students are being accommodated until the rebuilding of the school is complete.
Well, we're using 7 different buildings at the present time. We have renovated the community center where there are 5 classrooms, the Orange Lodge where there are 4. We're using the church basement. There are 3 classrooms there. We're using St. Pat's Hall as a gym. And this building that you're in now was obviously an apartment building, and this is being used as the office, distance education room, and special education room. Another apartment just across the yard is being used as a resource center. So in all, there are 7 buildings.
We also spoke to Lloyd Rossiter, who is mayor of the town of Ramea and is also a teacher at the school, and asked him if there was any assistance from the public in fighting the blaze.
Yeah, a fair bit, dragging hoses back and forth, running ladders, supplying coffee, sandwiches, and things for the fire department. Yeah.
Okay, I understand that a fair majority of the time was spent actually hosing down other buildings rather than the school?
Yeah, after the school got totally engulfed in fire and flames, and most of the effort was put on the existing buildings like the Lions Club, the Orange Lodge, some residences, to keep the fire from spreading through the center of town.
Okay, how did the students react to the fire drill?
Very efficient. Within 1 minute, total evacuation of the building.
Since the day of the fire, Ramea has been flooded with various charitable donations.
The response we had was absolutely tremendous in terms of not only of funds but in donations that people made. The day following the fire, people were calling from all across the province. Literally, we've had offers from as far away as Vancouver with help. Many people and organizations sent money. Others sent donations of books, Some students in various schools across the province and from Nova Scotia sent exercises, book bags, pencil cases, pens, anything that students would use in the classroom. And this was a great help because students had nothing, and this was an opportunity for them to get that material replaced with minimum cost to themselves. So we've pretty well received some of almost everything that we need.
Book boxes, such as this one, have been set up around the province for the purpose of collecting books for the students of Ramea. Also, a trust fund has been set up at Scotiabank. While the students and teachers are making the best of an unfortunate situation, reconstruction efforts are currently underway clearing the rubble at the site of the old school, where it is anticipated that a new building will be erected by September of 1995. Marine contractors of Pasadena are demolishing the concrete foundation and removing debris from the site. In the aftermath of such a crisis, it seems the town of Ramea has learned to move on and take everything in stride. Faced with adversity, the community spirit and sense of hospitality of the residents of Ramea hasn't been dampened a bit. If anything, the strength of the community has become more prominent. On the day of our shoot, we found that the people we spoke with could not have been friendlier or more helpful. Most people went out of their way to accommodate us and point us in the right direction. We would especially like to thank Mr. Boyd Keeping of Ramea, who kindly provided us with the home video footage of the fire.
On behalf of my associate, Jody Fosse, I'm Dave Cooper reporting for Troubadour 12 from Ramea.
Saturday, the Women's Committee held a teenage night at the community center. Here's a look at what went on. Today's street proofing tip is always choose the person you want to help you if you find yourself in trouble. The food for thought is morale is the essence of achievement. Well, that's all for tonight's show, but please stay tuned for the interview with Mr. Dave Gilbert. On behalf of BBS and BBS volunteers, I'm Dina Marsden, wishing you a great week. Good night. Mr. Gilbert?
Good afternoon, Dina. How are you?
Fine, thanks. How are you?
Lovely. Nice rainy afternoon and all that sort of stuff.
Yes. I understand you've been visiting the various Improving Your Odds classes around Burgeo this week. And I would like to know how you feel about these classes. Do you feel they're a good stepping stone for the fisher persons that's involved?
Well, Dina, I really don't know. I'm getting mixed reaction. When you talk to the class together, they tell you that they're benefiting from it, and then you talk to them individually and you get feelings, some of them, that, you know, maybe it's not as good. Other people are saying to me, look, if we had this money spent on improving the plant or something, that'd be better spent. So it's hard to know, but the way I look at it, I suppose that any time that you do anything to improve your knowledge, it's a good thing in some ways. Mm-hmm. So it's something that it's hard to, you know, it's like an intangible thing. How do you put a value on it? It depends on what the person who is going to that class, what they get out of it. So for me to say that it's good or bad, I don't know. I'm not going to the class. The only thing that I can say is that to the people who are there, they've got to make that decision themselves and say, is this beneficial to me? Is this helping me? You know, when I hear the people out on the street that are not taking the class, saying that it's no good, I take that with a grain of salt, because I think you got to be there, you know, to make that decision.
So from what you can gather, do you feel that these classes are providing the required information? Like the reason why these classes were set up, are they doing a good job with it?
Well, as I understand, these classes were set up by, you know, the CEIC, and they were developed by the Marine Institute and Memorial University, you know, to be a guide, to go into the communities and try and develop a sort of interest and a concern as where we're going to go. And from the questions that I had in the classes, I think that there's, you know, starting to be a concern about what's going to be the future of Burgeo, and, you know, how can they, as individuals, participate in getting through this crisis that we're in the fishery, and getting on with their lives afterwards, if it's going to be in the fishery, or if they're going to have to think about going on to something else. That's the main theme, I think, that I detected as I talked to the people, was the uncertainty, and they expected me as a member of government. They want some direction. They want to know what is the future. You know, is there the plant? They know that there's a lot of plants in this province that are not going to open when the moratorium is over. They want to know if Burgeo is going to be one of those plants. And I have had to say, I really don't know. I can tell them that there's 278 plants in the province. We know that all those plants are not going to open up. The position that the province has taken so far is that they have said, we're going to support, you know, if the operators of if the plants can come to us and say that they can operate a viable fish plant, an economically viable fish plant, you know, the province will have no problem with granting them a license. The other thing that the province has said is that they are going to try and put a special emphasis on plants that are where the areas that have been traditionally depending on the fishery. Now, the traditional, I don't think we have to prove that in Burgeo's case. I mean, this plant was here as a fresh fish plant, you know, almost 50 years ago. My concern about this plant, as I pointed out to each of the classes that I attended, was the fact that the current owner of this plant closed the Burgeo plant even before the moratorium set in. And nobody can seem, either government or union or citizen, can seem to get a clear-cut decision from Mr. Barry what he's going to do with this plant. And, you know, because bearing in mind right now, on this coast, we have two plants that are open, albeit part-time. Galtus and Hermitage is open, producing redfish that you're allowed to catch in the Gulf. And, you know, we have other plants in Newfoundland that are open, you know, producing frozen at sea cod. The National Sea Plant in Arnold's Cove is open. So if Mr. Barry was to say, come into Burgeo and say, look, I intend to operate this plant, you know, I'm going to, you know, when the moratorium is over on cod, fine, but I mean, there's other species right now that's being caught and processed with other plants, and, you know, maybe he should look at frozen at sea cod. One of the things that Mr. Barry talked about some years ago was that he didn't have the equipment, you know, to put in this plant to operate it as a frozen at sea cod. Maybe he should be going to the federal government and say, look, I can put 200 people to work in Burgeo, in the plant in Burgeo, if you people can come up with some money to help me, you know, streamline that plant. That's the other thing that governments have said, or the provincial government said, they're not prepared to put money into a plant for the sake of paying the salaries or something like that, if it's not an economically viable thing. But they didn't rule out the possibility that, you know, if Mr. Barry came in and said, look, I'm going to open this plant and I'm going to, you know, process so much redfish there that I catch, or I'm going to process crab, or I'm going to process herring, and I'm going to then, you know, fill up the slack with this frozen at sea cod that has been processed in other plants. I'm sure that, you know, governments would be only too happy to look at it, but nobody can get a very decisive answer from Mr. Barry, and this is where the problem comes from. So I suppose over the next 6 or 8 months, the governments are going to have to start to look at what is going to be the future of the various communities, and it's contingent on the plant opening. But I mean, again, we're back to the vicious circle, that if the operator wants to open the plant, the government is prepared to look at him. But I mean, in Mr. Barry's case, I don't know what to say. Mr. Barry, says, sometimes you hear him say that he's going to operate the plant, but then, there's nothing very definitive or definite about it. So this is, there's a real problem here in Burgeo. Over in Ramea, there's a different situation altogether. The Vic Young, the owner of the fishery products plant in Ramea, has told the people in Ramea, listen, I'm not going to operate your plant anymore. So go out and get, trying to get someone to come in there, and then this is what they're doing. I mean, they at least know if they find someone to operate the plant, and their stock rebuilds, they got a chance to go back to work. But I don't know what to tell the people of Burgeo, and that's been honest and true.
And that being said, I'm sure you're aware of the letter that was wrote by Improving Your Odds,
Yeah, one of the groups gave me a letter which they sent to the provincial minister of fishery, asking some questions, and I'm going to see the minister of fishery next week when I go back, and get him to answer those questions for him, and write him back and give him the answers as he knows them. It mightn't be what they want, but the answers mightn't be what they want, but at least I'm going to get answers for them.
Yes. So do you think it would be worthwhile, like knowing that Mr. Barry is being pretty quiet about his decision on whether to open the plant or not? That being said, do you think it would be worthwhile for the fisher people of Burgeo to work and maintain the fish plant, as was said in the letter?
Well, certainly, it's hard to answer that one, Dina, because first of all, if the fella is not going to operate it, what's the point of putting more good money into it?
But if it comes down that the announcement on the new moratorium says you must work for your moratorium package, and now that this class is willing to work and maintain the fish plant for their package, maybe...
that's all supposition, and I really, there's nothing that I could say about that could add to it. There's no good in maintaining any plant unless you got an operator that says he's going to open it again. I haven't got the comfort of knowing that Mr. Barry said he's ever going to operate that plant again. And until it's out and put on paper. And the other thing, of course, for the money to maintain that plant to come out of the package, well, I don't know if that's what the federal government intended for the money when it, that's going to be announced in that package. Yes. I can assure, and it's just as well to tell the people of Burgeo right now, so that, if they're expecting the provincial Department of Fishery to say they're going to put money into maintaining that plant, no, they're not. That I can assure you. We got 278 plants in Newfoundland right now that every community would like for someone to maintain, but the people that are supposed to maintain the plant actually are the people that are the owners, and the ultimate owners are the ones that are going to open up. Now, if some of them, if they feel that, they need government support, it's up to the owner to come and say, I'm going to open this plant. I have every reason to say that it will open within the next, 2 years or 3 years as the stock rebuilds or whatever happens. I would like help to, put in the proper equipment and stuff like that. But I don't think that, I know for sure that the provincial government is not going to put any money into maintenance. That's the one thing. If there's any money in this program, maybe instead of, the fish plant workers that want to stay in the fishery, and instead of saying that we're not going to take any training money, put our training money into this fund to help maintain that plant, I'm sure that could be, maybe that could be worked out. I don't know, but I mean, it's hard to talk about a program that we don't know what's going to be in it. Yes. It's not announced until next week.
Yes. Okay. Would you like to give us some information relating to the privatization of the hydro, or your views on the privatization of hydro?
Well, my views on the privatization of hydro, I think, are well known. And I suppose that my connection with it is a lot more closer than a lot of the MHAs, because I happen to represent a district that there's 200 workers in the Bay d'Espoir area in this district that are direct employees of hydro. What I'm finding, as I've been in the district now for the last couple of weeks, that the employees in Bay d'Espoir are very concerned because they don't know what the future holds for them, and they're saying that if it's privatized, you know, some of them might lose their jobs. Now, the intent of privatization is that nobody is going to lose their jobs. If what Hydro, as a Crown corporation, has told the government that they're running a very efficient company, and really, you know, they need all the employees they got. Well, if that's the case, those workers got nothing to fear. I mean, when Hydro is privatized, if it was an efficiently run company, they're going to still have their jobs, and that's what I have told them. They're the ones that are directly involved. Now, as I go around Burgeo and the classes that I have seen, they have told me they are dead set against the privatization of Hydro. When I asked them why, because, you know, a lot of them are telling me, well, they really don't have enough information, but they think it's bad. Now, I don't think that that's a good enough reason to tell me they're, you know, if you don't have the information on it. I feel that privatization of Hydro is going to be a good thing. In this province that we're living in today, it's a $1.1 billion debt that's shows up on our balance sheet as a contingent liability. In other words, if Hydro were to default, the province has to pay for it. I just heard today that there was a speaker at the Board of Trade in St. John's from New York, the bond rating company, where they rate us for the interest rate that we get when we borrow our money. And he was indicating that it would be a good thing for the province and would possibly increase our, make us more financially attractive in the future. As I say myself, I personally think that it would be a good thing. I think we would reduce the debt. We would pick up, you know, the equity that we have in Hydro, because we owe, you know, we owe $1.1 billion. So you hear people saying, "Oh God, you're selling the only thing we got." But I mean, in actual fact, if we owe over $1 billion on it, and you know, it's owed to people outside of Newfoundland, the bond owners outside of Newfoundland, if we sell it, we're going to be relieved of that debt. We're going to collect the difference from what's owed and what the company is worth. So we think it's somewhere in the vicinity of $300 million. And this would mean that we wouldn't have to borrow any money for our capital expenditure for next year. You know, that's for the building of roads and hospitals and schools and all that sort of stuff. And and possibly we wouldn't have to borrow as much, well, we wouldn't have to borrow as much the next year. So by doing that, if there's money you don't borrow, you don't pay the interest on it, because I don't know if people realize it, but our total provincial budget this year is about $3.6 billion, and out of that, 16% of it is, what's 16% of $3.3 billion? You're going to, you know, 500, we'll say 500 million of it goes to pay the interest on this money. So if we don't have to borrow $300 million, it means there's $25 to $30 million a year we're going to save forevermore that we won't have to pay. So that we won't have to pay. So that's the same as if Hydro was giving us, you know, if we kept it and then took from Hydro every year about $30 million. Now there's a lot of emotionalism stuff about it. You know, people say we're selling our birthright and we're giving away our water rights and all that. None of that is true. All we're selling in the Hydro is we're selling the generating station in Bay d'Espoir, and we're selling the diesel generation station in Holy Road, and the building in St. John's that cost the taxpayers $18 million that I don't think should have been there. But we're selling that anyhow. We're not selling Churchill Falls. And the Churchill Falls that everybody now says, you know, we gave away our stuff we gave away our Hydro to Quebec for this period of time. Well, we're not selling Churchill Falls, we're keeping Churchill Falls. And in the year 2016, this contract with Quebec, where we supposedly gave away our Hydro, will be over, and then we'll be able to charge them a fair price for their Hydro, and we'll, you know, we the province, the taxpayers, the people who live in this province will reap the benefits from that. And when you talk about giving away Churchill Falls back in the 1960s, giving away the power from there, there was very little protest at all about that deal when it was put together. Both sides of the House of Assembly, both the Tories and the Liberals, voted unanimously. It was a unanimous deal that it was a good deal what we were doing. Because hindsight is a terrible, is a terribly clear thing, I suppose. Nobody knew that when we sold Churchill Falls in the 60s, that the price of a barrel of oil was going to go from 10 or 15 cents up to $50. And that's what made the windfall profit for Quebec. And it's great to look back on it now and be experts. But I mean, at the time, there was really no protest from the government or even from the people of Newfoundland. So the other thing that I have to say, as the member for the district, the Premier has now said that he was going to somehow test the public to get their reading as to how they felt about the privatization of hydro. My testing in this district in the last 10 days between Bay d'Espoir and here is I don't know how the Premier is going to get a fair testing, because you're not getting, it's not the privatization of hydro. There's a series of many things that people are, worried about what's going to happen in the fishery, the income supplementation program, the nominational education, the civil servants want more money, there's all these things. And that, I think, this is what they're sort of zeroing in on. We're going to be, the one way that we can show instant dissatisfaction with the government is we're against privatization, but I think there's a case of many things. So I don't know how, in the name of heavens, that anyone's going to be able to get a fair testing of, is the privatization of hydro the thing they're talking about, or is it all the above?
Now that we're on privatization topic, how do you feel about the privatization of the marine service centers around Newfoundland?
Well, again, I suppose my basic philosophy says that yes, the privatization of anything is usually run better when it's run by private enterprise, but in the case of the marine centers, I haven't heard a protest from anyone, the inshore fishermen or anyone that's going to use it. You're the first one that has mentioned it to me. So I assume that the ultimate users, who are the inshore fishermen, must assume that it's all right. Otherwise, I would have had some, input from them. And I've checked on it, and I find that there's a half a dozen of those units around the island that have been privatized, and they tell me that they're operating as well or better as privatized units as they were when they were operated by the government. And what basically happens, of course, is the rate that's charged to fishermen is controlled by government, so nothing has changed there. But by privatizing it, the fellow who takes it over to run it, he can, put paint for sale and have nails and paint and fiberglass, and that's how he can make his extra money, by having the equipment and the materials there that the fishermen need to handle their boats. And of course, the other thing is, in some areas where you have a large amount of pleasure craft, he can do the same for the people who own the pleasure boats. And normally, he can set the rates that he's going to have for lift out and lift in and all that sort of stuff. But normally they keep it what the price that they charge to the commercial fishermen is the one they use for the pleasure craft. But depends. And to me, I think it can run better that way. I haven't heard any great protesting about it here in Burgeo, so I assume that the users here in Burgeo, the inshore fishermen, must feel it's a good idea or agree with it. Otherwise, I haven't received any protests on it.
Okay. Now we'll get on topic of the Old Cottage Hospital. Would you have any suggestions what you feel would be feasible over to the Old Cottage Hospital?
The Old Cottage Hospital. The Old Cottage Hospital is a building that's about 60 years old. Now, I understand that the town council, I have talked to the town council about it this time since I've been here, and I think that the town council has made a decision that for the next year they're going to turn it over to the Burgeo Diversification Committee, who are going to try and attract businesses to set up in the Cottage Hospital. I don't want to second guess them. I wish them luck. I have some serious doubts about this type of development, but I certainly hope that the committee is able to attract business, any business that you can attract to the community. If it's good business, fine. I'd like to see them attract, instead of, the type of business where, we're selling, retail stores, I'd like to try to get them to get someone in here to manufacture something, like manufacturing something, related to the fishing industry or the agriculture industry, or if you could do that, I'd be very happy with it. But to use it to bring a few more retail stores to town, I don't think that that's really a good idea. But and I know that they've done a study. I believe I talked to Sam Collier, and he's the representative from the council that's on the diversification, and he was telling me that they've done a study to see what amount of money would be required to make this feasible to operate, as a sort of an incubator mall or a business mall of type, and there's somewhere in the vicinity of $200,000 that someone is going to come up with that they've got to raise even just before they start. So the one thing that I see about it is that site is one of the best sites in Burgeo. It's developed, and the site is more valuable than the building. I don't know, and like I say, if the diversification committee can find a profitable use for the building, God bless them. If not, we still got a nice site here in Burgeo that you can possibly use for some industrial development in the future.
Today, excuse me, today it was reported that 85% of the public service sector members are willing to walk out. Would you like to elaborate on that more?
Well, Dina, I suppose that's I don't know where the report coming. I'd assume that it's true, and it possibly is. You got to bear in mind that the country that we're living in, Canada, right now, is in very serious financial trouble. All of us, every one of us, man, woman, and child that happen to live in Canada today, have a provincial and federal debt that totals $22,000. So all of us the government has built up that much of a debt trying to run itself, run and pay for the services that we're being provided with. This is where it now costs us. So our children are going to be doomed to paying off this $22,000 per capita debt that we have. So all the governments have made a conscious decision that they have to cut down on the spending. You heard the federal government budget came in, and they talked about that they are trying this year to keep the current account debt below $40 billion. And over the next 3 to 4 years, they're going to eliminate the current account debt. In this province, we brought in a budget which said that we're going to try and keep our current account debt down to $24 million this year. But in order to keep our current account debt down to $24 million, we have to go to the public service unions, the teachers, the healthcare workers, the road workers, all the workers that work with the government, and sit down and negotiate with them. And what we have to negotiate with them is that another $50 million has got to come out of the benefits and wage package that they now have. So unlike some of the we started at this early, and we really haven't cut back anyone's salary. The only thing is we put a freeze on the civil servant salaries for the last 4 years. This year we're saying, look, we got to negotiate. We got to get our house in order now to the point that we'd like to go on and carry on and sit down and get into and be able to give you raises again and stuff like that. But there's some stuff in your contracts that we want to sit down and negotiate. So what the government did this year is that they gave the public sector workers their proposals, and these negotiations have been going on for 6 or 7 months, but the unions didn't believe it. They didn't want to negotiate. They haven't wanted, they took the first proposal that we put out and brought it to the workers and said, look, here's what the government is offering. we think this is ridiculous, we're not going to negotiate. Now, anyone, and I'm sure the people in Burgeo are well aware of the fact that the opening position that's put out by the employer is not the final one. So, but the unions have said this, we consider this to be the final one, we're not going to negotiate, so, we're left with a situation that we might, well, they're going on strike. And when the union takes that decision on their own, there's very little that the employer, in this case the government, can do, only wait and see if they're going to go. If they're not going to negotiate, and they say that we don't like the offer, so we're not going to negotiate, well, that leaves the government very little choice but to say you have to take the action that you want. You'll notice that Prince Edward Island, we haven't legislated any rollbacks in wages or anything like that. Prince Edward Island just announced their budget a couple of days ago, and they negotiated a 7.5% wage rollback for every civil servant in the province without any negotiation. We haven't done that, and we've wanted to sit down because we feel that instead of taking it out of the wages, if you sit down and negotiate it, and I'm sure anyone, the people of Burgeo are well aware of a labour contract, and they know that the fringe benefits in a labour contract are sometimes more expensive than the actual wages. So all we want to do is sit down and say, here's a way. There's certain things, like there's situations in the general government workers contracts where overtime, could be negotiated. Sick time could be negotiated, to be, this is costing a lot of money. We could, this is the sort of stuff that we could negotiate out that would save the province a lot of money, and it wouldn't be taking anything directly out of the employee's pocket. In the case of the teachers, there's that 2% clause where we're holding teachers, that they haven't got enough students to have a full class, but we're holding teachers, we can only lay off teachers up to the extent of 2% every year. So there's some boards that got a surplus of teachers that are teaching maybe 5 or 6 in a class. And so, there's that sort of thing that got to go. There's another thing in the teacher's contract is the substitute teaching, that a lot of people seem to think there's been abused. If you stay out, if the teacher is off sick and the other teacher goes in, they really don't carry on with the work. It's more or less a babysitting thing. The teachers will tell you. I'll be criticised for saying that, but in a lot of cases that's the sort of stuff we want to negotiate. And one of the things that I found most strange about the public sector unions this year, and particularly the teachers, was that one of the things that they came out and said, the government wants to take our severance pay. Yet we heard the Premier come out and say, no, this is not the case. We heard Vince Baker, the Finance Minister, come out and say this is not the case. What the thing about severance pay was put in, the opening contract again with the teachers and with the public service, because we have a thing in the contracts in Newfoundland that's, I don't think it's in any other province in Canada that there's a severance pay package like the one that we have in the public service union contract here. What it would mean is that you, at 25, goes to work with the government, but after 10 years you're there, and all of a sudden you get a chance of a better job in Kingston. So away you go, and you are allowed after 10 years to take your severance pay and go. Now, what the government is saying, this in effect is not severance pay. Because, your job wasn't severed. You quit of your own volition, and you're taking this $10,000 or $12,000 on your way. The government has said nothing at all about the fact that a person who works for 30 years, and there's a severance package there, which as he works with the government for the 30 years, he assumes that at the end of the time he's going to get a severance pay because he's finished with the job, he's retiring. So what I heard the unions say was that, God, they're taking our severance pay. In actual fact, we wanted to change the word severance to redundant in that contract. So what that would mean, that if someone was working with the government for 10 years and he got a better job with a private company or with the federal government or whatever and was paying more money, and he decided to quit, all right, he wouldn't get this severance pay. But if for some reason, the government decided that his job was no longer required, that we didn't need a person to fill this job, he would get his redundancy pay instead of severance pay. But I mean, that's the sort of stuff that in contracts that, you know, they sit down and negotiate. In this time, we had no choice but to bring in a budget saying we're going to have a $24 million deficit next year, but it's contingent on getting the public service unions to negotiate $50 million out of their package. Now, how it's going to be done, you know, we hoped it was going to be done by negotiation. If they go on strike, it'll be done very quickly, because in a period of 2 or 3 weeks, you know, the amount will be there. But still, the point has still got to happen after this is still all over. If they go on strike, there's still got to be someone sit down and negotiate before they go back to work. And, you know, I think I don't have to tell the people of Virgil, I think they know that very little is ever won in strikes. You know, there's no side wins. The government doesn't win, or the union doesn't win, because, you know, this talk, we're going to save, you know, the taxpayer, the government, for the taxpayer. I suppose there will be a certain amount of money saved in the payroll, but remember, there's other costs in there to try and keep the services going while the strike is on. So it's not as clear cut as we would like to have it.
The past couple of days, there's been a lot of talk about the ferry services, the new ferry schedules here on this coast. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, over the last many years, there's been talk about the ferry service on this coast, and as you know, the ferry service on this coast is provided by 2 branches of government. The federal government provide the service through the Marine Atlantic, and the provincial government operate ferries, provincial ferries, one in the Burgeo, Ramea, Grey River area, and one in the Galtas Hermitage area. The total cost to government is about $7.5 million a year to operate this service. Now, in the service, then, you know, there's areas that get very good service out of this, and there's some areas that are not serviced so well. So over the last several years now, I've been after government to see if they could come up with a way that we could give better service and, you know, reduce the cost, I suppose. So one of the communities that really I felt, there's 2 communities that I really felt were shortchanged in this district, were Fosse and McCallum. They were, in the summertime, they had a good service. They had the Marine Atlantic was giving them a daily service, you know, a boat going from Hermitage to Port aux Basques, and then, you know, we had one from Port aux Basques to Hermitage. So, I mean, they were getting that service. And then Grey River was doubly blessed, because Grey River was also getting the provincial ferry to go in there on Tuesday and Thursday and Friday and Sunday. And so, in other words, Francois in the summertime was getting, you know, 6-day service, because it was one day the boats used to lie up. Grey River was getting the same 6-day service, but they were also getting another 4 runs a week in and out by the provincial ferry, so this was a duplication. Galtas on the other end of the area, Galtas to Hermitage was having 5 runs a day by the provincial ferry, and in the summertime they were having 2 runs a day by the federal one. So, and then Francois and McCallum were still only with their 5 runs, you know. And then in the wintertime, when that schedule changed around, well, the people in Grey River were getting 2 trips a week, supposedly with the Marine Atlantic ferry, and they were still getting 2 trips a week with the provincial ferry. So they had 4 trips, where the people in Francois have 1 trip or 2 trips, you know, depending on the weather in the wintertime. What they have done now is that Department of Transportation and Marine Atlantic have gone along the coast, and they've gone to the communities that are affected, and the communities that, you know, really depend on it for their existence is west of here you have La Pile and Grand Brett, and then east of here you have Grey River, Francois and McCallum and Hermitage. And then over in Fortune Bay, you have Ranconner East. But, you know, to us here, I'm interested in the district of Virgil Ladysmith. So they've gone and they drew up a list of about 6 different services that could be provided. And the one thing that they have pointed out is that we can't have any more duplication of services. If it's going to be provided, there's going to be a 1 guaranteed service rather than, you know, 1 and then 2, you know, a backup. So they've presented it to all the people and asked for their input, and they've gone to every community. And as you know, every community has their own favourite service that they'd like to have. Now, they're going to take the recommendations of all those committees, all those communities, take it into St. John's, sit down, try to come up with the one that's the most favourable or the least controversial. And it's going to be hard to do, because any time you change anything on anyone, there is winners and losers. And in this case, I feel, that there is going to be that sort of thing. Then once the two arms of government have a look at this thing, they're going to convene a meeting in St. John's, and they're going to ask for a couple of representatives from each community to go to St. John's or wherever they're going to have it, Marystown or Burgeo or wherever they're going to have the meeting, sit down, present the case to them again, let them, fine-tune it and argue out the finer points, and hopefully within the next 3 to 4 to 5 months, we'll have a service that's going to provide give a better service to everybody on the coast. And I suppose as the losers get, the people who pursue themselves losers will see as it goes along that really is not the intent. It was, it's to give a fairer service to everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I know there's a announcement coming out maybe next week regarding the new moratorium package. What do you think will come out of this announcement?
I don't know. It'd be hard to, that's a question that no politician would want the answer, because you're assuming something, and if you just break down that word assume and you put the ASS and then you separate it from the U and then you separate it from the me, that makes an ass out of me and you. If I try to assume, what's going to be in the package. Actually, there's supposed to be a meeting in St. John's for the government MHAs tomorrow morning to get the scope before it's announced. And all I'd be doing is that, I really don't know. I can say that I don't feel that there's going to be any great changes for the next 6 months. I don't know. This is the general feeling that I'm getting around. I feel that when you talk about the figures, I've heard Brian Tobin and I've heard Walter Carter on talking about the fact that, the fishery of the future, there's going to be reduced from 25,000 down to 15,000, and professional fishermen. Some of the statistics that are available about that, and Richard Cashin's report, which has been released, tells some horror stories about that, and it's not as serious when you read Cashin's report and you see some of the statistics is there. It's not as serious as it would seem when you say there's got to be 10,000 people go out of the fishery. One of the statistics in the Cashin report, just to give you an example, is that there is 3,000 people on the Nuller and Cod package right now that are receiving their checks every week, that in the last year prior to going on that package, their income from the fishery was $350 for the total year. So I don't think that we can say that those people were full-time fishermen. However, they qualify and are now making more money on the package than they ever made from the fishery before. Now, if that's the type of people that's going to go out, I mean, nobody, there's nobody who wants to see anyone go out, but this package was put in for the people that were engaged full-time in the fishery. And I don't think that anyone can say that someone that made $350 a year is full-time in the fishery. So if that 3,000 is going, that's 3,000 out of the 10,000 we're looking at.
Yes.
And they're looking at, everybody knows there's abuses in the fishing industry as far as, the people, the way it's set up, and they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about, in some cases they're talking, about the inshore fishermen and the fact that their wives were classed as inshore fishermen even though they didn't put in the full effort that fishermen did, And, I'd say the new package is going to have all types of potential for these people to be looked at and interviewed, to see if they really are professionals or if it was a convenience thing that you were able to bend the rules to get involved in.
Yeah, because so why wasn't there a screening, elimination type of thing when the moratorium first came out? Or
Well, Dina, that's one of the things that, I suppose, again, hindsight is great. It was announced in a hurry. And again, the other thing is that a lot of people don't understand it when they say you're in government, you must have had some input into it. But the provincial government had no input whatsoever into this. This was a deal that was put together between the provincial government. There was input from Mr. Cashin of the Fishermen's Union, but the provincial government didn't know about this until 15 minutes before Mr. Crosby announced it. We felt there was a lot of problems with this program, and I don't say it would have been perfect if the provincial government had had some input into it, but maybe it would have been a little better than it is, because when the program was announced initially, it was to cover the fishermen on the northeast coast of Newfoundland. I mean, Burgeo happened to get in afterwards by virtue of some mathematics that said that they did produce northern cod here, a total amount of northern cod enough to qualify. But the program was put in initially for fishermen along the northeast coast of Newfoundland, and those fishermen traditionally fished, 3 or 4 months of the year, and that was it. It's not like the fishermen along the south coast, because the fishermen along the south coast were fishermen that fished, 10, 11 months of the year, and, were more full-time fishermen than the people in Bonavista Bay and Trinity Bay and Conception Bay. So, there was all kinds of, it was open to all kinds of abuses, and there was 25,000 of them scrabbling to get on in a period of a month, so it's easy to look back and say we should have screened it then, but at the time I think that the pressure was on from the union, and everybody, look, let's start paying our men. So they realized, like in one of the classes that I went to here, the instructor pointed out that where he came from, down around St. Anthony, he knows that there was women on it that were never in a fishing boat. He knows that there's people on it that are getting more than they ever got before. Mm-hmm. And, some people tell me that there's people on it here that were the part-time workers in the plant that, the night shift that didn't work full-time that are on it. Well, fine, they got on. And now, I guess, when in the new program that comes out, they're going to have more time to sit down and screen and look at it and say, what, there's got to be, there got to be a better way, I suppose. But initially, as I understand it, for the next 6 months, everything is going to go on pretty much the same as it was.
One more question. The fundings for the Recreation Commission for the arena here, is there any fundings that would go toward that?
Well, Dina, I'm hoping the town council has made a request for municipal funding this year for money to do a job on the Lions hockey rink up there. And this year there's going to be extra municipal money spent because the federal government has agreed to put in, I think, about $90 million into Newfoundland over the next 2 years to help improve the municipal funding. And so this is going to be money that we never had to spend before. So what the Department of Municipal Affairs has done this year is that they've, said to the towns, send in your request and we'll treat them the same as we would ordinarily. We'll put in a third, the province will put in a third. They'll take a third from the federal government, and the municipal area that request it will pay a third. And they've even complicated that a little more by saying, they'll look at individual cases, and if the municipal council really can't afford the full repayment, they'll look at ways to jumble it up so they won't have to do that. I'm this program is now being assessed. The requests are in from all over the province. So the Department of Municipal Affairs are very busily now going through this and sorting it all out and putting in priorities on it and stuff like that. So I'm expecting that within the next month some decision is going to be made. I'm hopeful that Burgeo will get favourable response. Of course I can't say until such time as all the applications are in from the whole province and assessed. If I had my wish, yes, but I don't know that.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Well, Dina, I must say that you had a fine list of questions there today. I understand that you're going to leave us and go off to Ontario, so I'd like to wish you the best in your new profession, and you weren't here very long, but I've enjoyed the few chats that we've had, and I'm sorry to see you go, and good luck to you.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
Thank you.